except besides Bill Louie. William Louie, you saw his bio, so I won't spend time repeating it necessarily, and we'll get to know him a bit more. But I will share that this Spotlight Series is one that we, as a team at MOCA, really wanted to share with each one of you. We really have the pleasure of taking down oral histories. We've taken well over 2,000 oral histories down of Chinese who have lived in America, who are Chinese Americans, and it's such an incredible honor to hear their story, to hear their journey. And sometimes in this world that we live in, we only hear about the successes or the deep struggles. And we just wanted to sort of piece that together and provide a space where we might share, some of the challenges, but how we overcame them. Also to give models, especially for our young people, many of them who I think have called in, to sort of give them a path, an example of how others may have navigated their lives and their professional careers, but some of the things you don't often hear about their life growing up, potentially as immigrants, as second generation, as American-born Chinese, and just to share a little bit of that, to uncover it, because sometimes in the world we live in, we're so busy that we only look at the professional aspects of each other's identity. But in this safe space, we really wanted to highlight some of that fuller sense of that journey. So Bill Louie, thank you so much for joining MOCA today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and I know you're in the Berkshires in a house that you designed, is that right?
Yes, I'm here. It was built in 1979. Yeah.
And why did you spend some of your time in Chinatown and then some of your time in the Berkshires, but tell everyone where you live in Chinatown, because I remember how vividly you described that special place.
Oh, when I used to travel to Chinatown with my parents, it was sort of a common place for everyone to gather, so it became a habit. And I began to see a project coming out of the ground on Park Row and Worth Street. And I looked it up. It was a beautiful piece of brutalist architecture. So my wife and I would be traveling back to the concourse where we lived, Grand Concourse on 203rd Street. We said, well, it'd be nice to live here. We'd be home by now. So we put in an application. Sure enough, a few years later, we were called and we moved to a place called Chatham Towers.
Well, tell me about Chatham Towers, because it's this little secret enclave of a lot of artists and architects, so I understand.
Yeah, well, it became that for the same reason I think I went there, because it's an architectural jewel. And it was built in the mid-60s, during the period of time when minimalist architecture was being explored, raw concrete being used as the medium and the expression of the exterior. There aren't that many of these building types in New York City. IM has one, has a few, and Chatham Tower is one of the buildings that are built during that period of time. Right. So it was built. It was actually a New York City project. It was actually a middle-income housing project that had income limits and so on. As an architect, it was easy to get in. Income was not that high. So I was able to move in there in 1971. So that was, so I've been there ever since.
And you never, I mean, you're an architect, you're a designer, you're often working, your offices are in Midtown, you travel all over the world. What's the appeal to living in Chinatown for you and for your wife, May?
You know, I've been asking myself that, why did I move to Chatham Tower? Was it because of the architecture or was it because of the neighborhood? I think it's both. I know for sure that Chinatown played a major role in my parents' history and their it was their safety net. Chinatown was a gathering place for their peers and people who were living in I call them outposts, because these laundries that were spotted across New York were places where families grew up as a way of making a living. And so Chinatown was the draw. It was where they went to shop for food for the week. The children came there and they played with each other, and that's how I was able to have exposure to the people who were my peers.
Bill, let's talk about your family a bit. And I had the pleasure again of taking out your oral history when MOCA honored you as our Legacy Awards winner honoree a few years ago. But I know that Louie isn't your official surname, and that you are a son of a paper son. Tell us a little bit about your real surname.
My father, in the last 5 years, I might say, I started to get really, really interested in trying to understand his journey. And Tim, my nephew is on the line here. He's been really instrumental in helping me come up with the story about, or trying to investigate how he got here. So these pictures of my father, the one on the left side is 1936, when he had just come back after marrying. No, he actually, after he had come back, and I fathering my sister in China. But the middle picture is when my mother came in 1937. She came, this picture was with my uncle in front of his laundry in Washington, D.C. So that was, let me just minimize this. I'm covering the one picture. Oh, this is one of the tragic parts of my father's early life, running back and forth, trying to create a life in America. He married my mother in 1928. And this picture on the right side is probably 1930, where my oldest brother, this was his first son, who actually passed away in the village. That was one of the tragic moments of his life. So that's that picture. Now the picture itself, well, it looks very traditional. These are studio setup shots that apparently they did in China to share with their families. You can even see they touched up the hairdos and other things like that. But my mother was in the middle. This is my father's first son.
And I see the picture of your father on the left in 1936 is Columbus Park. Is that right?
Columbus Park and 70 Mulberry Street, where your artifacts are stored, still it was there at that time.
There it is, just right on the corner there. And your father is wearing Western clothing. The mother, your mother in China is wearing a more traditional Cheongsam-like dress. I'm so interested in this middle photo where your mother has just adopted this extremely Western clothing, and the hair in particular. Do you know anything more about the history of this image?
I know that the period of time, you can see my father, he was quite dapper. And I think the story is that these pictures were taken, well, I can tell you the story about the Louie family name in a minute, but here he took these pictures to share with his family in China. And rather than say I'm a laundryman in America, which is not a glamorous business or visually, they call themselves haberdashers. And so haberdashers is a better nomenclature for people who deal with the clothes and laundry. So he always dressed up. He was always dapper. And whenever you saw, even out the children, on Sundays, they were all dressed up to go to Chinatown to celebrate, or at least show how proud they were of their children. So my mother, when she came over in 1937, this is her first year in America. She came through Washington. She's visiting my uncle in Washington, D.C. In 1937. And she, I think, was greatly influenced by my father's choice of clothes.
Right. And just putting this in the context of timing, I mean, your dad came in the early 30s, if I'm correct.
He came earlier. He came in his first trip here was 1922.
1922.
Yeah, 1922, and that was still during the Chinese Exclusion Act. So he was quite cautious about. And I would find in the papers that he came over with the papers as a paper son but as a citizen. So he got his papers from a citizen. So his name was Louie, citizen, a U.S. citizen. So he was able to travel back and forth fairly readily. I don't know where he got the papers from, but he bought it from a Louie.
And what was his real surname, or your real surname?
A Lee.
Lee. So
Yeah.
in the Sundays when you went to Chinatown, dressed up and dapper, and you mentioned that you used to hang out with the family association. And which one did you decide to
My father had close ties with the Lee Association, and he did his banking with them, loans with them, and they were the structural support system for immigrants. I don't think he trusted the Western banks. He just put his deposits at the associations.
And so your family ran this a laundry in the Bronx. And I know you had 3 brothers and sisters, and the 6 of you lived in one room behind the hand laundry. Can you just describe that space for us?
Yeah, the hand laundry was an interesting setup. I always thought I had all that I needed to make my life happy. I had 2 brothers and a sister living with us, with me, with my parents, basically in the same room for a period of time. But we were in the basement of an old law tenement. I don't even know what that is, but it's a 6-story building. And in the basement was the laundry. It was bought from another laundryman who was retiring. So in 1937, when my father came over, he bought over that business. And in the back was a series of rooms. It was a very linear building, and there were several bedrooms and a kitchen near the back. But when you were in the basement, all the windows were basically at grade. The courtyards were low enough so the windows opened up into the space. So it wasn't that, I didn't feel that we were underground except for when we go down into the laundry from the front door. And so we entered the apartment through the laundry all the time. You come through the laundry and go to the back. And that's what reminded me when I saw your picture with your curtain behind you. That was the aesthetic that separated the laundry from the living quarters.
And how big was that space? And was it well lit? Can you give us a feel of that space?
The courtyards were extended the full length of the building going to the back. It was probably about 60 feet, about 50 or 60 feet deep. The width was probably around 20 feet. The portion we lived in was more like around 15 feet wide, going back behind the laundry. The laundry was full width of the building. And back in the back was a series of spaces that we used as a dining living room. There was a bathroom that was not quite a bathroom, but it had a toilet bowl and it had a tub. It didn't have a wash basin. Then there was a long bedroom, and then the kitchen in the back. And so the hallway that led to the kitchen was also used as part of the laundry to dry, hang up the curtains that my father used to wash. But the long bedroom was our bedroom for 6 of us, up to the point when Mary, my sister, got too old, my brothers got too old to be in the same room. So we then took an adjunct space next door in the basement as well that allowed us to expand our living quarters to have the three boys in one bedroom and my sister in a separate bedroom. But they all had windows. They had windows to the courtyard.
You know, when I took down your oral history several years ago, and just now you said you thought it's all you needed. You know, for someone who's built the 8th tallest building in the world, it's fascinating to me, and I'm sure everyone on the call, how you think about space and what was it about that space and the intimacy of it that made you feel so sufficient.
Well, one of the things I never felt in Wata was food and shelter. My parents were good providers, even though they worked the laundry. The laundries were not exactly easy business. considering that my parents were charging 18 cents a shirt, fully washed, ironed and packed and do the abacus calculator, and you add up how many shirts you have to do to provide food and shelter for a family of 6. So, but then I love my brothers and sisters, so I had a great time growing up with them. And in these close quarters, they were all different in terms of personality, and we got along really well. Our parents were busy running the laundry, and we helped when we could. And so my sense of happiness was about the familial relationships with my siblings and my parents.
And so interesting now that many of us find ourselves back in a close environment with our family members and those we love the most. I thought it was an interesting connection.
But if you look at the pictures that's on the screen now, I mean, I was exposed to a colorful neighborhood. You could see I thought this is interesting, where my public school is on the left side. You can see there's a great mix. I was the only Chinese in my class. But my father also had the wisdom, my parents had the wisdom to say, send us, all of us, to Chinese school in Chinatown. That means that after public school that ended at 3 o'clock, we got on a train, the number 5 train and number 6 train, to take us down to Chinatown every day. I did it for 4 years. My 2 brothers, George and Eddie, did it for 6 years. And my sister and I, here you can see my sister in the second row, Mary, she's there, and we went together. She went for 2 years, I went for 4. But my latter 2 years was with my brother's other 2 years. So I never traveled alone on the subway, but we traveled together as a group. Imagine today having kids from 11, 12, 13, 14 travel on the subway by themselves.
Right. So this is so interesting. It's such a contrast in terms of your upbringing. One in a very mixed, racially diverse group. And this looks like, is this second grade? Were you about 7 years old?
Yeah, I was in second grade. I was 7.
There's Bill Louie. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I might suggest.
and a tie.
Yeah. And then this sentiment of being in a group that looks a lot more like you and your siblings. And where was this? This was in Chinatown. Do you know which building it was, or which school?
This is Wheelock. This is the old red brick one that was replaced by the current one that's in white brick now, on the middle of Mott Street.
Yeah.
This one, what was interesting was everyone in this class were either children of laundrymen, children of restaurant owners, or children from the farms nearby. So they were all their parents were sending their children to Chinatown to participate in this amazing school. I thought it was really an opportunity to introduce that culture to the disparate families that spread out throughout the neighborhood. And a lot of these children were from Chinatown. And I know that some of them, my cousins, were in different parts of Manhattan. Some of them, in this picture, there were 5, I think 3 sisters and 2 brothers from a farm family. And they were here every day for 4, I don't know if they went 4 years. I went for 4 years.
There's some lore that when you're 7 years old, you have a true sense of what you should be or your calling should be. I've read a couple of books around this type of concept. I was wondering, when you were 7 years old in these photos, did you know that you would become Bill Louie, KPF Bill Louie?
Well, even younger than this, there's another class picture in the first grade where I was enamored. I don't have it here, but I was enamored by a nice girl with banana curls, and one day she asked me to draw something for her in a book, because I had been I realized, or they realized that I had some drawing talent. So that in terms of the ability to draw came up early, but I declined her request and got bopped over the head with her book. But I knew then that my passion for drawing was there already. And there I am sitting on my mother's lap, a bundle of joy.
So you're the youngest of four. You were a pretty good student from my recollection, from what you shared. But there were definitely, it was exclusion, before the Immigration and Naturalization Act in '65. There was still a lot of discrimination around. And yet
Yes.
you had this experience in Chinatown where in some ways you're seen within people who have similar upbringings and exposures. So perhaps, was that a place where you gained confidence?
Well, I was, well, the exclusion, as you remember, wasn't lifted until 43. And even then, the quota was only lifted to 100. And so 100 didn't allow a lot of Chinese to bring their family in still. So I think it was, the confidence came from my bracketing, you might say, or when my parents bracketed my Western exposure to my Eastern exposure, where the Chinese class gave me a broader view of the world, and my Western class, where my neighbors were Puerto Rican blacks and Jews, there was a whole mixture of, it was a colorful neighborhood. So I never felt any racial bias because everyone was also minority. But Chinatown was a place where I found maybe the larger world was available. Even at a young age, I was in a drum corps. I participated in the social. I was, by the way, a terrible student. I was a terrible student, but I enjoyed the school, the nature of it, where it exposed you to a lot of activities. So I was in the drum corps. I was being in the drum corps was like being on the football team. The hot shot. So
Right. And so I know you mentioned, there was quite a bit of social activity when you were in high school, and you weren't necessarily a good student because you'd often find yourself, was it bowling or different social events that you would take part in Chinatown? Can you tell us a little bit about your young life?
I should qualify that, Nancy. I was a terrible student in Chinese school, but I was a really good student in high school. So that hopefully clarifies a little bit. But I did. Bowling was one of the sports that I participated in. As I was growing up, my friends were bowlers, and this is my sister. And with the only mechanical thing we had in the apartment, in the laundry, was this radio. So she was probably listening to Howdy Doody or some other station. But we didn't have a television for a long time.
So you go to high school and you start shaping up, if you will. And where did you attend school, and how did what sparked your interest in architecture?
In high school, I was like most kids in the New York area. They were sort of lost as to what they wanted to do. I was lucky to find or have someone take interest in my drafting skills. And I think the last month before graduation, he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "I'd go to college, but I'm not sure yet." And he said, "Well, what do you think about architecture?" And he was an architect. He was teaching drafting in high school. And he said, "I think you have a skill that you should pursue." And I said, "Fine." So I did that. And the next thing I knew, I had a flyer coming into my home that gave me an opportunity to look at the field of architecture a little bit more seriously. And so I attended a trade school. It was run by Vito Batista, and he gave me they gave me a training in architecture, allowed me enough skills to become a draftsman in an office. And this was the change in my life right here, the soul of my soulmate. I met her early in 1963. We got married in 1964. This is May, and my brother George is to my right. He passed away in March, unfortunately. He was my tutor. He tutored me. He was good at math. He was a good student. He taught me when I was going back from trade school back into City College. I went to City College at night. He tutored me in math so I could get back into the engineering classes and the physics classes and so on. So I miss George, but he was my tutor. And May has been with me for, oh, by the way, I have to, so I'm celebrating my 56th wedding anniversary today.
Happy anniversary. And that's why we wanted to definitely show this photo of you and May. And I have to apologize to May that we're taking some of your precious anniversary time away from her. But you mentioned, you just shared a bit of amazing episode of your life. You're working as a draftsman. Yeah. You're going to college at night. You're getting tutored by your brother so that you can make up some things. You described it as being an apprentice, I remember, when I was taking down your oral history. The days of being an apprentice seem far, far long ago. And did you feel that there was a ceiling when you were, when you thought like, one day I want to be an architect? And, you also shared that May worked for I.M. for years. So she also had a bit of that interest in design and architecture. So how did this all fuse together in terms of that time and space? And did you find that it was a tiring period of your life, or was it a possibility period? It was a possibility. I'll mention that maybe it was very simplistic, but my outline of my life was more a set of milestones I set for myself early on. For some simple reason, I had four milestones. I said, for mobility in New York City, I was going to get my driver's license, believe it or not. That was a milestone for me. Then I was going to aim at getting my architectural license. That was another milestone for me. Then the next one was I'm going to open up my own office. That was another moment. That was my target. And then the fourth one was to live happily ever after. So that was in one nutshell my goals. I got my driver's license. That was the easy one. The next one, the architectural license, was one that I was aiming for, whether it was through getting my degree in school, get qualified for the exams, or apprentice, as you mentioned. If I apprenticed for 12 years under an architect, I could also qualify to take the exam. So by the time I got both together, my degree and my apprenticeship in line, it was 1974. I took my exams and passed. I passed in one shot, which I think was one of my goals, was not to have to drag that out. So that was two out of the three, two out of the four milestones that I was trying to reach. But that was a long one. It took 12 years of practice and 12 years of school to get my degree. I always worked while going to school up to that point. So when I got my degree, I had to make a decision what to do next. And it so happens that my trajectory of my life actually coincided with those of who are my partners today. So in some ways, while our goals were slightly different, my trajectory in terms of work experience was in line with what I was doing. May told me, there's more to architecture than what you're doing in the Bronx, because I was working in the Bronx, and there's a wonderful Jewish architect who loved May. May's hard not to love. And said, if you stay with me, and he was 65, he said, if you stay with me, you can have my business, which is, there were people in the Bronx who actually did that. They got their license, opened up their storefront offices.
and had a good life. My Robert Gottlieb, who bless his soul, was one of them. He always dressed in great suits and lived in Rye, New York, in a great house that he designed. So I said, well, that could be a live happily ever after scenario for me. And then I met these guys. And I met Gene and I met Bill. Gene is on the right and Bill's on the lower left. Pat Conway and Larry Goldberg are other colleagues of mine at that time. But our paths crossed, and Gene and Bill were on their way to forming their firm that's become one of the best known firms in the world. But I was fortunate enough to meet them. They're both visionaries of their own. Gene was the dreamer and the rainmaker, and Bill was the guy who inspired my path to go into design side of architecture. Up to then, I was more excited about building buildings, being more learning how to build the best buildings, and so that was when I made a slight shift in my path from technical side of architecture to the more design side, and that was what Bill brought to my life. And to this day, we're best friends. And Gene, on the other hand, he's an amazing individual who saw opportunity and reached for it, and he guided us most of our career through who we are today. He's still our chairman and active as ever. But he was the one I'm not sure why actually, what he saw in me, or whether, and Bill and I were more in the architectural design side, but Gene had a vision of where the work was coming in. And he was the one who sent me around the world. We started in 1987. He said, well, send me to Australia, to Sydney, to do a project that became Chatham Towers in Sydney. Then I ended up in going to Taiwan and then Korea, and so I was one of the, at that time it was 87, 89, 90. There was only a handful of partners, as opposed to now. Now we're close to 30 partners across the world, the globe. But then we had maybe 5 or 6 or 7 partners, and three of them were design partners. So Bill was the guy that should be kept at home base, covering home, and I was. I think that's how Gene saw it. That I was more travel. I could travel better, so I was sent to these various outposts or remote places to explore. So we did a good project in Taiwan, a good project in Australia. Started the work in Korea, and then Singapore, and then China. And right. So that was these two people. These are the two people that have influenced my.
But we need to go back a little bit, Bill, because we need to talk more about May here. So you said something very important just now, and you said May was the one who said there's more to your work than what's happening for you in the Bronx.
That's right.
And I just, and then also sharing just that you work with I.M. Pei, so that's fascinating. And you're really in this period, I.M. Pei just having passed away not too long ago, but sort of, 30 years about your senior. Mm-hmm. And just wondering, what was it like as a young Chinese American artist in this space where I.M. Pei has already sort of, really made a name for himself at this period of time. And also your wife is working with him. Mm-hmm. Did you, what was that dynamic like? And also, what was it, why did May say what she said to you? And do you think if she had not said that, you would still be working at that firm in the Bronx?
Possibly, I would say definitely. Because you think about the opportunity that was being offered. Here's the elderly man who is going to retire. He had a clientele that would be just shifted over to me. It was open my office and live happily ever after period. So that would have been a path for sure. But she was seeing the kind of work I was doing out there. It was more of a houses and industrial projects. It wasn't really what we know today as great architecture. This is Greg Clement, one of my partners I traveled to parts of the world with, and he was one of my favorite partners. He took me to Brazil. He introduced me to the projects in Brazil. We went to Korea together. But it was Bill who actually he came over and I met him. He had worked at with IM Pei at the National Gallery, and Bill was one of the best designers in the office, in the Pei's office, and he was recruited by Gene to join Warnecke's and then KPF. So what May was saying was, listen, there are big buildings being built around the world by people like IM Pei, and you should take a look at the other side of the spectrum of architecture. So I did, and that's when I left. I declined Mr. Gottlieb's offer, and I said, no, I got to learn more. So I went off and I went and went into the city with the hopes that I would become become a great job captain. That was my goal. So I went and joined Warnecke's office, where Gene Kohn was running the firm at that time. He was running Warnecke, which was a West Coast-based office, and he was opening up a New York office. So I joined them in 1970, about 69. And so there I met Gene, and Gene was already doing what he always does. He's running a firm. And so that was my relearning what I wanted to do. And I said, I wanted to learn how to do great tall buildings. I wanted to learn how to do big buildings. So then I went through this other training with Bill and under the KPF flag.
So you're starting this new big tall building, part of your life, and you're going home to dinner with May. I just how exciting was that period of time for you? And do you remember any defining moments where it was, again, you were in a 30 by 20 one room, in the back of your parents' hand laundry, and still thinking that was a wonderful time. And now you're building the tallest buildings in the world. Some of them listed here: Hysan Place in Hong Kong, the beautiful Hong Kong Electric Building on Kennedy Road in Hong Kong, and this beautiful tower in Miami.
Yeah.
Tell the audience just how this is unbelievable. I mean, you come from such a small space where most of your upbringing was, and you're building the most magnificent towers.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with the luck of the draw. I met the two best colleagues I could ever have in my professional life, Gene Kohn and Bill Pederson. That was something that, it was luck. Bill didn't have to like me, but one of the things that I was able to do, you see now that I was able to build a building in Guangzhou, which is only 80 miles from my ancestral village, which to me is an accomplishment. It sort of brings me full circle in some ways. When my father left in 1922 to America, I was able to come back at least close enough to help build this building. And I do have to say that our practice is not a single person practice. We have colleagues, we have people we collaborate with. So the projects that you talked about, like the Hysan Place, I authored that with Rob Whitlock. And so there were always other partners that I always worked with. Here I worked with Forth Bagley and Paul Katz. So these projects are huge. And so today, we are here you have where my father started. He started in this one-story brick building that had no toilets inside and had a wood-burning stove on the inside. That was it. That was his starting point. And I did visit this for the reason that I wanted to understand where he came from, the struggles that and why he left. Why did he have to leave? And once I saw it, I understood why he had to leave. And besides, the communism in '49 shut the door for his return, so he could never go back. But it was a revelation to be able to see this amazing. I mean, this structure is so primitive that it's almost like the laundry in some ways. It's got this one roomness about it, and daylight coming from one side. So it had an impact that I wanted to see it. I know that my oldest brother died here, and my sister was born here. My first sister, Eileen, was born here, and my mother decided that she didn't want to live here because of the bad luck. So she actually moved to Toisan. My father went back home and had Eileen, my sister Eileen, and then had her move to Toisan, which is living with her aunt. So this is an important starting point for me, and to understand it, and then to be able to say, if I were to go full circle and say I've been able to build a building close enough to this place that I can identify as something that I contribute, it has a lot of meaning to me.
So this, you mentioned tragedy, and your father had actually lost his first wife as well.
Yeah, she lived here.
And they lived here, and then your brother, you said. So this being 80 miles, when you first went to China, what year was that? And
that was 2018.
That was the first time you visited this home, but the first time you went to China was earlier for work. Is that right?
Yeah, the China was in about 2000, a little bit early, about 2000, a little earlier, 1997 or so.
Knowing, your parents and their departure, and given the situation, just wondering, did your parents often think about home? And where was home for them? Was this the home in the heart? And for that matter, where's home for you?
This is, my parents always thought of this as home, even though they couldn't go back. I know from the day I was able to understand, my parents always sent money home. We had relatives who lived in this house. We had cousins who needed money all the time. And my father would always go to the banks, to the associations, and actually have money transferred back to China to support the relatives back home. I think my father, he's a realist. I mean, he realized he couldn't go back anymore because of the lifestyle. He was maybe too used to the West. But for them, I think home was still China. Though the family was here, I think the family was where he centered his heart, was where his family was. And for me too, it's where the family is ultimately home. I'm curious and interested about Chinese progress, but as far as home, America is my home.
And is it Chinatown?
You mean in Chinatown?
Is home Chinatown for you?
Not for the reason that it's, yeah, I think so. I think Chinatown has a lot of interest in me. And even though I speak Toisanese, and it's the dialect of the town, it is a fading period of time. So I have a lot of ties to Chinatown because of the history and how I grew up. So, but here's the inside of the house with my aunt. This is the aunt that I've discovered is still alive. She's married to my father's first cousin. And we got in touch with her, or my aunt, my sister-in-law Pauline got in touch with her. And she met us there and let us in the house. She still has the keys to the house. So that's my long lost aunt. Oh, I should say the other way. We're the long lost immigrants to America. But you can see that even in this house, as much as it went through the revolution and so on, there's still artifacts here that represents my father's first wife, father's first son. Their pictures are still hung on the walls. So there's a respect for the residents of the owners of the original building.
Right. And we have some questions queuing up, so I do want to give a little time to that, which is May. Again, such a force in your life, and such a a predictor of good things and good fortune, if you will. What was it like for May to work for so many years with I.M. Pei and in such a male-dominated profession? Did she ever share thoughts about that with you?
Well, she was the personal assistant to, and when she first started there, she was a personal assistant to Harry Cobb and Aldo Casuta. They were the partners at that office. And so she was not an architect, she was the clerk, the technical side, you might say, support side. No, I think she was very instrumental in both introducing me, opening my eyes toward that side of the architecture. But I give her credit for staying with me, because the times I've traveled across the oceans away from her, this period of time when I started working as an architect, traveling from 87 on till 2010 and 20, I left her home. I mean, she was home tending to her own business. But in some ways, I jokingly say to her that she sent me through college, because when I went through college, she was home. She was taking care of the household while I worked, and she always worked. But for her, I think she's very proud of what we've achieved together. But and right now we're doing the last stretch of our lives. We're living happily ever after.
So you have a driver's license, right? And you have that. But what is your favorite? I think I know what you're going to say. But what work are you most proud of, and for what reasons?
Oh, that is a hard question, because that's I fall in love with the projects I work on at the moment, and they have to be, because you have to put all your heart and effort into creating the next project. Right now, I'm working on a project in Sao Paulo again, and that's right next to the Infinity project, which I thought was one of my favorite projects and favorite clients. This one was I worked with Jamie on early on in our career together. Jamie, I worked on this for Hang Long, for Ronnie Chan, who happens to be a great supporter of MOCA. But Jamie and I authored this together. As I said, we're a collaboration of architects of similar minds. And Hong Kong Electric, I did this with Hugh Trumbull, who's one of my other partners. So, and this is CNOOC, the oil company of China, that was won in a competition back in the early 2010. So these are projects that have come through my hands. I guided it through with the help of others. And Infinity here is one of my favorite projects, actually. Part of the favorite clients, our favorite project, is a result of having good clients. I think I.M. said it once to Bill and conveyed it to me, that it's not the quality of the project, it's the quality of the clients that's important. So here, and so the career, in some ways, in China for me has terminated at Guangzhou, which is again the place closest to my father's village.
Bill, Louie, you have a driver's license. You have your architectural license.
Yeah.
You had, your office now being the major designer at KPF, and you have May, and you have 57 years of happily ever after.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And, from the back room of your hand laundry to Beijing, and then back again, and then this incredible building, CTF Finance Center in Guangzhou, just 80 miles from your father's ancestral home. Thank you so much for really just breaking down those barriers and just serving as such a model for Chinese in America. And also, I think one thing that we've gotten to know about your personality is that you see the glass very full, not just half full, but you see it very full. And we're so grateful for your leadership.
Well, Nancy, thank you for the opportunity to sharing my story. Hopefully we'll influence some new young architects to pick up the baton.
One last question that I did see come up is the apprentice model dead? Can we still go in that direction? Are there too many barriers to entry?
No, the apprentice model, meaning that if you don't go to college, you still can take your license if you apprentice for 12 years with a licensed architect. Yeah, and there are people still doing that. But then again, don't forget, during the time when I was going to school, not everyone went to college. It was just a matter of, because my father couldn't send us to college. There was no way. So it was a work your way through. And that is a path forward. As long as you put your mind to it, I think keep the goals simple. I have four markers on my life, and then I just hit them one at a time.
And we'll leave you with our audience with this final image of Bill's family. What would your father say to you today, Bill?
I think he'd be proud of me, even though he never really said much. He never even gave me a lot of guidance, but he demonstrated a work ethic that I think I inherited from him. And hopefully his style. I like his style.
To the finely dressed William Louie, and to all of our guests, thank you so much for joining us today. And you can hear more about Bill Louie in the oral history, which we'll be posting on our website at www.mocanyc.org. And encourage you to join us for other programs. We'll be starting a new program called MOCA Workshop on the Road, where we will feature antiques and artifacts from all over the country and the stories behind them. And as well as continuing this series on the Spotlight Series, an intimate conversation with Chinese in America. Bill, thank you. Happy anniversary.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you very much. Bye.
My love to May. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah. Bye-bye.